It is really an honor. We get to have him come in, him and Robin come in once in a while. And this guy has come into our life almost, Pat counted the other day, almost 11 years now. It's right at 11 years that they came into our life right at a time when we were ready to give up on pastoring. You've never seen any of this. This would have never all happened. But he came along and encouraged us, brought this grace message to us. And by the way, next week I'm going to start teaching on, I'm going to teach next week, starting out, it'll probably turn into a series, but teaching on the fulfillment of the law. Okay? There's been some real misunderstanding about grace. You can't understand grace till you understand the law. The greatest preacher of grace was Paul. Paul was the greatest student of the law. Until you know the law, you don't even know what you got when you got grace. Amen? Amen. So we're going to teach on that a little bit to help you understand that God never did, Jesus never did come and destroy the law. He used a word in there, he said, fulfill it. And we need to know what that word means. Because it goes back to some promises that God gave to everyone who fulfilled the law. And we want to understand those things. We don't want to talk about God destroyed the law, because he never did. He wouldn't, because that would stop the blessing. Okay? Anyway, he came along and helped us understand this grace message 11 years ago. Introduced it to us, really. And he's helped us over and over and over again. And we're just so thankful that he comes by here once in a while and infuses us. We spent a day yesterday shopping, and just in that time with him, just really encouraged us, builds us up, and helps give us indicators and things that we're heading in the right direction. Amen. Everybody needs, he's been a father in the Lord to us, if you could call it that, and he's been a best friend. So I just want to introduce him right now. He needs to come on up here. He's going to deliver a word for us today. Give us some stuff. Great teacher, Vic Porter. Amen.
I'm not sure who that guy is he's talking about. Am I on or off? Hello? Hello, there we are. Like I said, I'm not sure who he's talking about, but I want to meet that guy someday. It's good to be back with you. Several years ago, I taught a message on challenging the law of disintegration. I'd never thought of anything like that before. And I picked up an article by James Dobson, and it was just about 2 small paragraphs, and he mentioned in there the law of disintegration. It was set into motion. I thought, well, what in the world is that? And I took that 1 paragraph and I began to study it, and I've got a 3-tape series on it, on the law of disintegration. I'm not going to teach all 3 of them today, okay? But one of the things that we need to understand is the authority and the power that has been invested in you as believers through the new birth. We use the term, we have a recreated spirit. Now, don't forget that. It's recreated. It was that way, and then it got put aside because of sin. But Jesus came back and he said, I'm going to recreate that was. Are you following me? And the law of disintegration is really quite an interesting, practical illustration of the authority and the power that has been invested in the body of Christ because of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. In Genesis, every time that God created something, it says that God saw that it was good. But whenever he created man, he didn't say it's good. He said it's very good. Everything God created was for us and for our pleasure. Listen, this earth is created for us, not the us created for the earth. Are you? Everything was created for our pleasure and for our benefit. Now, when Adam became a living soul, the word living there in the Hebrew means a spirit soul. In other words, Adam's spirit and his soul were in basically the same. It was one. When Adam sinned, that separated. And see, before that, he was a living soul. And see, here's the thing. You and I are spirit, soul, and body. Now, because of sin, there's some changes there. And our soulish man, which is our mind, our will, and emotions, and our thoughts, and our feelings, now we have to renew our minds to the Word and get it to line up with the Spirit of God that's on the inside of us to the new birth, so that we can walk in the victory that belongs and the power that belongs in us. People say, well, I'm a Christian, I don't need to renew my mind. Listen, you don't have to. But the problem is, until you and I do renew our mind to the Word, and I'm talking about not just reading the Word. You know, you can read something and not have it. You can read something and say something like this. You've heard me say this before. I read that before. But if all you ever have done is heard something or read something one time, it's not yours. It's past tense. You want it to be present tense. And that's through the process of hearing and hearing and hearing. And then one day you say, I got that. That's mine. If all you've ever done is heard something, I can come in and take it from you. But if you're hearing and hearing and hearing, and I come in and try to take it from you, you'll say, no, you can't do that because that's mine. So God wants, if you allow me, this being our spirit man and this being our soulish man, he wants these two to connect back to the way it was. When Adam became, when he became a living soul or a spirit soul, he had within him the spirit and soul and the ability to create. Now listen. Adam had the same, he was created in the image and likeness of God. He had the ability on the inside of him to create things. We're not talking about going out and creating another world. We're not talking about that. You understand? But see, I think, you don't have to believe this if you don't want, but maybe I'll lead you toward that here in a little few minutes. If Elmer had the ability to create, living on the inside of him, living in this part of him, these two were all the same, and I were the enemy, and I was the enemy, my first thought was, how do I stop him from moving forward? He still tries to do that today. If I can get him to eat of this fruit, and that creative ability on the inside of him dies, then his ability to create will be limited at best. So that's what I want to do. And for 4,000 years, give or take a few, I don't know how many, man lived under the influence of the law of disintegration. The day that Adam sinned and he lost that creative ability, everything began a downward spiral because the enemy's system was in place. And everything, it's all, if you allow me, it's gone to hell in a handbasket. And it was just going, choo, 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 choo. That's not God's plan. Never has been, isn't today, and won't be tomorrow. The ability to create is part of our identity. It's a major part of our identity. What the enemy wants to do is to stop your creative identity. If he can stop your identity, if he can destroy your identity and who you are and what you have the authority to do, then he will control you. I asked the Lord one time, what is the greatest challenge? What is the number one thing that the devil wants to do in our lives? And he said he wants to get you and I to lose our identity. And I said, well, how does he do that? And here's what he told me. We got a series on it, My Cup Runs Over. It's a 15-minute series for talking points. I think there's like 18 sessions in it. And I studied this out for a long time. And what the Lord spoke to me about is that if I'm going to stop your identity, if I'm going to destroy your identity, if I'm going to get you to lose your identity in who you are, Judy, the first thing I have to do is I'm going to create either a circumstance or a relationship problem to get you to become offended. If I can get you to become offended, if I can get you to take, if this is an offense and I can get you to take that, then I'm on me, the enemy, I'm on the way to breaking your heart. I will develop that offense. I will see that it's blown, all over your family and your wherever. Those dandelions are little fuzzy things that grow up and you blow on them and you never know where they go until they pop up somewhere. It's like we had a lady come into our church years ago teaching a seminar for the women, and I happened to be there and just to hear. I hadn't heard her for a long time. She brought in a bag of down feathers. They're real fluffy. And then she had a fan up there. And she turned that fan on and opened those feathers up, and I thought, of course it's not your church, it's mine. Now we got to go find those things. I remind her of that every time I see her. They're still hunting for feathers. That's been 20 years ago. See, that's what the enemy wants to do. If he can get you offended and he wants you to talk about it, he wants you to meditate on it, he wants you to develop it and cast it out so many places. And it comes back and it begins to break your heart. And see, once your heart is broken, then the strength, the joy of the Lord is depleted in your life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. And as long as you have his joy, then you have his strength, and you can run this race without getting tired. But when it's depleted, you have to run this race in your strength, and you can't do it. And once that happens, then he's in charge. You've lost your identity. You've lost your ability to create. You've lost who you were. And I personally believe that one of the primary, if not the most important item on the ticket on the enemy's thought was, I want her to be offended. I want her to spread that out. I want all that. I want her to lose her strength. But the reason that I want her to lose her strength is primarily so she'll not be able to create. Hello? Now, with that in mind, the earth is in a downward spiral. And things are getting worse out there. The creative ability on the inside of you, listen, that's where change comes from. It lives inside of you. In Genesis chapter 5, or chapter 3 and verse number 5, I'm just going to paraphrase this, that Adam's identity was challenged. Verse number 6, Adam settled for a lesser wisdom. Verse number 7, listen to this, Adam's ability to see himself accurately left him under the control of the law of disintegration. Before Adam sinned, there was no fear and no shame. You heard me teach on shame here. There was no fear or shame. After Adam sinned, the first thing that took place was fear. The second thing was shame. You might remember this. I was asking the Lord about all of this stuff, and he spoke this to me. He said, fear is the fuel that drives the vehicle of shame to go hide behind your fig leaves. And when your fig leaf doesn't cover you, you'll hide behind the trees of the figs. But then, whenever you're found, you're easy to pick on. Y'all notice that right here. I didn't. But once you have been found after hiding, the first thing you do is to blame her. It's her fault. Hello? What? Look at the TV. I mean, you see what kind of mess we've got? It's not my fault, it's yours. Well, why do I want to blame her? Why do I want to blame you? Why do I want to blame Pat? Because it's an easy target. No, I'm just kidding. Why do I want to do that? Because I don't have the guts enough to stand up for my own mistakes. Hello? And that spirit, that system, is part of the downward spiral that the earth was in. Under the influence of the law of disintegration, we become subject to the usual rules and patterns of life. The usual rules and patterns of life are bondage. We fall underneath the bondage and the control of the enemy to carry out his plan, or the lack of carrying out God's plan. And see what happens, we count what goes on out there. That's just the way the world is, and we can't stop it. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. You're born again? You're born again? You, me, all of you? In this room right here, there's enough power living on the inside of us to stop the enemy's downward spiral in this whole community and worldwide. Reinhard Bonnke died a few days ago. I don't know whether you, probably one of the most powerful evangelists worldwide, I guess, ever. 79 years old. What did he do? He took the creative power of God that was given to him through the new birth, and he changed nations. What do you do whenever you have a healing school? What is dean or whoever speaks at the healing school, what are they doing? They're putting information out there that will cause a creative hunger on the inside of you, an awakening of that that's already inside of you, to go and stop the law of disintegration called sickness and disease. Every time you lay hands on somebody and pray for healing, you're challenging the law of sickness. Every time you give into the lives of those that can't give back to you, you're challenging the law of poverty in their life, and God will cause blessings to come to yours. That's his system. The devil's system is, you got to hold on to that. You never know what's going to happen. Of course we don't know what's going to happen out there, but we don't have, listen, I'm not saying to turn the TV off completely. I'm saying whenever you hear it, know that's their story, not yours. Under the influence of the law of disintegration, we become easy prey. It's like, I taught this some time ago here on the intoxicated mind. When you're intoxicated in your mind, your mind is poisoned, you become drunk. A drunk person is easy prey. If Elmer's got $100,000 in his suitcase walking down the street and I know it, and he can beat me physically, and I want his $100,000, I've got $20 in my pocket, and I'm saying, Elmer, come and let me buy you a drink. Elmer, come and let me buy you several drinks. And if I can get him drunk, I'll take his money. And I don't have to beat him. It's the same way with the enemy. If he can get you and I under the influence, he can control everything about your life. Does this? And if you will, I believe that we can become intoxicated in our minds concerning and join forces with the law of disintegration. That's not your identity. That's not who you are. That's what the devil wants, but you can stand up against that. For example, when Abraham would have a whole bunch of camels, about every year or so, he'd have to go, buy new camels. And he may buy 15 or 20 at a time. Why? Because the old ones were wearing out. Every time you buy a new car, you drive it off of the lot. The law of disintegration says you just lost $5,000. Are you? Every time it breaks down, you have to have it repaired. You buy a house, you paint it, you put new carpet in it. A few years, maybe a few months, it has to be done again. that's called protecting and upgrading your investment. Businesses left unmanaged go broke. A brick that's left in the parking lot for a long period of time will turn back to dust. The sun and the stars began burning out. Our bodies our body ages and needs maintenance. Sometimes it needs surgery. Sometimes it needs a casket. Are you? It's the progression. And see, what happens is a lot of times that progressive law of disintegration, it progresses further than our knowledge of who we are. Most of the church world doesn't know a whole bunch of stuff. Why is it that the enemy wants to keep us in the dark? Because that's where he can control us. Oh yeah, come on to church. Yeah, that's no problem. Go to that church because they don't teach you much. We can't change because, Grandma built this church, and this is our church. That's my pew right there, and don't you sit in it. I've been there for 40 years. Well, what have you learned in 40 years? That's my pew. What have you told somebody that tried to sit in it? Get out. What is that? That's the law of disintegration in motion. When you come to a church, listen, I appreciate what he said earlier, but you got to understand, I listen to him. He says things I think, I didn't think of that. See, when you bought this building out here, this was a wasted space. I mean, it didn't, there's nobody in it. What have you done to it? You've upgraded and protected it and recreated it into, if you will, the image and likeness of the Father. Give 5 years and it'll be an incredible place out here. See, we got any mechanics in here? Anybody a mechanic? You don't have any? Oh, gee, you better get it. Oh, there's one way back there. Ooh. Well, you got a lot of business. Nobody else in here has. But see, what does he do whenever your car breaks down? He uses the creative ability on the inside of it to fix it. Anybody sell carpet? Let's just say that you do. Okay? What do you do whenever you need carpet for your house or flooring for your house? You go to the person that has it. What does she do? She recreates it and stops the law of disintegration. This is simple, but when you mow your yard, well, what if you didn't mow your yard? What if Dean didn't? I think Dean, one of Dean's most favorite things around here, maybe even above preaching, is the mowing. He loves to get out there on that lot, on that tractor and mow. He's never asked me to help him. He's never has asked me. He gets on that four-wheeler and pulls trees down. I'm thinking, why don't you do that while I'm here, Dean? Huh? You don't want to. My point is this. Every time he cuts the grass, if you just think with me, he's challenging the law of disintegration. I know you said that's silly and stupid. Well, what would happen if you didn't cut the grass? What would happen if you didn't paint the building? What would happen if you just, opened up hey, this is church, and we're not going to do anything to it. It's been sitting empty for, you know, Robin and I bought a building in Springfield for our church. It was 11,000 square feet, and it was on 4 acres. It had been originally built for a church, but it hadn't had a church in it. It was probably 20 or 25 years old when we bought it. Hadn't had a church in it for years. Hadn't had anything in it. They wanted this much money, and I talked to them for 2 years, and I said, I ain't paying you that much money. So I got it down to this much. I got it down to half. And they got tired of me asking, and probably said, okay, let's just get rid of it. And I signed a deal with them. I said, I'll pay you the interest for 3 years, and then we'll balloon it out. We got a good price on it. But it hadn't had new carpet in it for years. You could pull up one little piece of carpet and the whole thing would come up. This is so interesting. I said, Lord, I don't have 100 or 200,000 to recreate this building. I need help. He said, go call the warden and ask him if he's got, if there's a work release program for the inmates at this minimum security. I said, okay. I didn't even know that was even possible. I called him. I said, do you have a work release program for the inmates? He said, yes, we do. What do you need? I said, I need to remodel that building up there. We can do that. Now, these are guys that are locked up, that had their creativity stolen from them. Probably through stuff on their own part, you understand. But never. It's like a child like our oldest son, whenever he was growing up, he had this imagination. I mean, we had a house that the garage was come underneath the part of the house, and it was this tall, a block wall way up here, and there was a big pine tree right over there beside it, and a place where he played with his cars and his trucks in the dirt over there. He sat out there, 4 and 5, probably 4 years older, and he played. He created so many things with that dirt. He had this imagination that was beyond measure. I came home one day and one leg was hanging off of that block wall, sound asleep with a tractor in his hand. He hollered at me one day and he said, Dad, look at me. And I think, where are you? And he had climbed that tree that was above the edifice of our house. He said, I'm up here. And I said, what are you doing up there? And he said, I'm saying how far I can go. And I thought, you want to say, get down. I mean, and I probably did. But then we take that imaginary play garden, those pictures, and we set them in a classroom, and you say, now, Johnny, you sit here, don't you get up and create art. And we stop it. Albert Einstein said this. He said, imagination is greater than knowledge. Don't lose that. Don't lose that. I'm not saying you shouldn't have little Johnny sit down because you and I need rest. Johnny needs to sit down for a little bit. This kid, I mean, he used to, in the crib, he would take the rails on that crib and he would just go like this for probably 45 minutes or what, until he just wore out and would fall back in this. And Robin would think, thank God he is asleep. see, that imagination, that's the creative part of who you and I are. And the enemy wants to stop it. And what he did in Genesis, Genesis chapter 3, the first thing he did is in Adam, he challenged Adam's identity. The enemy challenged Adam's identity. And he got Adam to choose the lesser part of wisdom. And then Adam was unable to see himself accurately because he was under the control of the law of disintegration. In verse number 17, the ground became cursed. Verse number 18, thorns and thistles grew up. Verse number 19, man began to die and was headed back to dust. The law of disintegration was put into motion. Everything that was in order became in disorder. Under the influence of the law of disintegration, we became controlled by the usual rules and patterns of life. And we were like the drunk man that became easy prey. Since the fall of Adam, turn over to Isaiah chapter 61 if you would. Since the fall of Adam, the law of disintegration has put everything in a downward spiral. Everything that's in a downward spiral needs to be protected and upgraded to stop the law of disintegration. Isaiah chapter 61, I'm going to read a few verses here, and then I'm going to highlight verses 4 for sure. He said, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the good tidings unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, or the church, to give unto them beauty for ashes, and the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Verse number 4, real interesting. Vic's translation goes like this: and because we have the ability to create, he has given us the ability, and they shall build up the old waste. They shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the waste cities and the desolations of many generations. Listen to me. What did you do when you moved from downtown to here? You repaired, you took on a project to change it. Where did the ability to even know that it needed to be changed come from? It came from on the inside of you. That recreated spirit that has the ability to create a vision. It's inside of him. How do you get it on the outside? You talk about it. You plant seeds. Can I pick on you? No. Okay. What do you do with him? He worries me some days. Okay, I'll pick on him. If you say, Dean, I can't see that. I can't see that. What does Dean do? He says it again in another way. What if you can't see it then? He gets somebody else. Says, Kurt, go tell her what we're talking about. And Kurt comes in with a very simple picture. Says, I see it. What happens when she sees it? She goes, do it, and does it. And you don't even have to see it. You say, she said to do it, and I'll go do it. I don't understand any of that. Sorry. But look what else he says here. Now this gets better. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. And the sons of the alien shall be your what? Plowman. Okay, I underlined it and I crossed one of the part of the letters out. Y'all don't do that. Of the Lord, men shall call you the ministers of our God, and you shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and their glory shall ye boast yourselves. Look at verse number 7. For your shame you shall have double. And for confusion you shall rejoice in their portions. Therefore, in their land they shall possess the double. Everlasting joy shall be unto them. This is who you are. This, listen, Oral Roberts had a sign in his office and it said, "No small plans here." I would say that Reinhard Bonnke had that sign in his office. No small meetings here. Let's say that his first meeting, he had 10,000 people. And the budget was really tight. And he think, I think I'm going to step up to 15,000, but it's going to take more money. What do? You go do the 15. Well, what if it'll be there? Why? Because you're giving to people that can't pay you back. And then he went up to 500,000 sometimes in his crusades. You think he stopped? No. Why? Because there's something on the inside of him that was challenging what the devil had meant to be done. And he said, it ain't going to happen under my watch. Unless a relationship is protected and upgraded, it will drift apart. It's been said that if you take two small boats and you put them on a pond and leave them unhooked, one of them will go to one side and one of them will go to the other. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, when the God of this world system acquired the lease of the earth in the garden, the law of disintegration began. The creative ability of the human spirit began to fade. Vic's translation. How does these things fade? Because we start looking at what we can see with our natural eyes, and we don't look at what we see with our inward eyes. When you see from inside of you, this outside doesn't matter. It's just a challenge. If you pray and believe here, and that's where you get your answer, that's where it comes to pass. See, if this is your prayer of faith and believing, and you haven't prayed, right here you have no challenges. When you pray in faith, believing, right here, that's when the challenges begin to take place. Where do they start? Right here. What happens then? They try to get you to back off of what you're wanting down there. What this is doing, every step, is trying to get you to abort your dream, to abort the ability, the creative ability on the inside of you, so that you never reach your goal listen, and the dream that's placed on the inside of you isn't for you. It's for the people. And we've been given the responsibility, he says, to take this creative ability and upgrade and protect that has already been wasted. What has been wasted? Lives. This isn't about a building, this is about lives. It's about the people of all of Southern Illinois. The dream that's inside of him is bigger than this. How do I know it's going to come to pass? Because he sees it. He sees it in measures. How's it going to come to pass? When you see it. I'm not talking about the challenges that you see. They're always going to be there. Everything that you've ever done has a challenge. And it's designed to get you to stop doing that. And it never takes place until faith is conceived in the heart. And until it's birthed. Listen, I believe this. I believe you can pray right here and receive right here. It doesn't happen that way a lot of times. But it's the challenge here, and it says, oh, there's not enough money. Or, the property we're going to buy, they sold it. We knew it's ours. All of those things. What are these things designed to do? They're designed to get you to abort the dream that's on the inside of it. They're designed to get you to stop the creativity, the picture that you see inside of you. Why does the enemy want to stop that? So that you won't go tell Southern Illinois. Why am I here today? To tell you these things. I'm going to leave in a little bit. They're yours. It's not, listen, this isn't a pie in the sky thing. This is what's inside of you. This is the ability that you have to stop the law of disintegration from taking over into Southern Illinois. This is it. It's inside. In 2 Corinthians, he's talking about that, the glory of the Lord. The word glory there means the view and opinion of God. Now listen. When Elmer gets a hold of God's view and opinion of him, he quits worrying about your view and opinion of him. As long as he's worried about your view and opinion, and he change accordingly, he'll never move forward. I'm saying you ought to be nice, I mean, don't act up, Elmer, There's some days I act up. I'm just talking. I know I'm the only one. No, I just looked at Dean. I know there's two of us in here that act up from time to time. But you know what we haven't forgot? We haven't forgot that our acting up's already been covered. Thank God. What if we held on to it? What if you held on to the past? You wouldn't have the future. Until you turn loose of the past, you won't go to the future. How are you going to turn loose of the past? You have to identify who lives inside of you and the purpose. Yeah, but I'm going to heaven because I'm saved. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you need to go to heaven. But that's not the only reason you were born again. You were born again. You were recreated in the image and likeness of God. Not just so you could go to heaven, but so you could take thousands with you. He came to restore and to reclaim that was lost. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 5, that we are the salt of the earth. Listen real carefully. The salt has three primary purposes. The first purpose for salt is to destroy. The second purpose of salt is to preserve. The third reason for salt is to add flavor to something that's bland. The white of an egg yolk needs salt. There's a lot of folks out there that are like the white of an egg yolk. They need salt. Who's the salt shaker? You are. What do salt shakers do? They destroy the works of the enemy, and they preserve the lives of people. They build and upgrade, and they add flavor. I don't know that Elmer needs any flavor added to his life, but let's just suppose he's a real dull person. He's not. Let's just suppose he is. What is my responsibility? What's Dean's? Dean's the salt shaker. You're the salt shaker. Elmer, straighten up. I'm going to put some salt on you to add flavor to life. It's okay to have fun in church. It's okay to be fun. What do we do when we add flavor? We change people's perspective. We move them to sad to glad. Closing. In Galatians chapter 5, talking about the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, meekness, faith. Those are all wonderful things, and I'm glad. But the next phrase tells it all. Against such there is no law. Whoa. Every time that you operate in the fruit of the Spirit, there's no law that counteracts it. You go out here and you speed at 80 miles an hour, there's a law that says you can't do that. They'll stop you. But if you go out here and love the unlovely, there's no law that says you can't do that. Every time you're walking in the Spirit, there's no law that tells you you can. And see the creative ability, the creative power of God that lives on the inside of you. The same power that raised Christ from the dead, it's not out there floating around somewhere. He deposited, when you were born again, He deposited that same power right here. And He said, this is yours. And the primary focus is that it has the ability to create. The first person that needs to create is the image of who He is here, so that He can take that and go here and here and here. Are y'all here? Say this with me. I've been created for a purpose, to establish the image of God, the power of God, the creativity of God, to create, to build up the old waste places, to establish new and better. In the name of Jesus. To establish healing. To establish prosperity. Oh, I just want that prosperity for me. It's not for you. You understand it is for you, but it's reaching people. It's not about you and me. Father, I just pray that every person releases the creativity to stop and to challenge the law of disintegration in their life, in their thinking, and then in the lives of other people, and in this world, this realm that they live in here in this community. It's yours. Listen, you don't even have to ask for it. It's already there. Just take it from here and go. I asked the Lord one time, I am going to quit here in a second. I asked the Lord, I said, look, how big do you want ISW to be? Because I thought, my religious mindset, I wanted to grow this big. And he said, how big? He said, as big as you want it. And I said, as big as I want it? Yes. I said, how can you say that? He said, I gave it to you. What do you want to do with it? You know what I did? I went and pushed a couple of buttons, and I mean, that thing exploded bigger than I was ready. What do you want to do with the gift that's on the inside of you? Well, God, I just want to do what you want me to do. I gave it to you. What do you want to do with it? Expand it. Yeah, but the market, I'm not telling you to be unwise, but God's market's not a problem. Yeah, but they hurt my feelings. Get over it. They're saying bad things about me. Listen, they've said bad things about me for 40 years. And some of that's been the family. My life was threatened 4 or 5 times, and several of them were in the church. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? That was a reason enough to quit. I said, I'm not going to quit. And they all look at me like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to. You come from Jasper. I think that's the very reason that it's a challenge. It's in him. It's in Elmer. It's in this couple here. You guys. It's there. It's not going to be there. It's there. What do you want to do with the creativeness that's on the inside of you? Amen. Love you. Appreciate you.